The stars hung silently over the void, scattered like tiny lanterns across a sea of endless black. Against that backdrop drifted a single, weathered vessel, old, angular, and scarred from 100 past battles. To anyone watching from afar, it looked like a relic, something dragged out from humanity's early days of space travel. The galactic observers watching from their sleek, polished ships called it primitive. Some even laughed. But those who had faced humanity before knew better than to laugh for long. They called the ship Resolute. It wasn't built for beauty. Every plate of metal was welded for purpose, every weapon mounted out of necessity, not pride. Inside, the air was dense with recycled oxygen and the faint hum of power conduits running through the walls. Its crew, humans, tough and weary, were the last of a forgotten fleet. The galaxy had long moved past this kind of warfare. Energy shields, AI-guided missiles, and plasma weapons had replaced the crude railguns and ballistic turrets that still lined the Resolute's hull. By galactic standards, it was a fossil, but that fossil had teeth. When the alien armadas of the Vir Dominion stumbled across the ship in the outer edges of the Perseus Rim, they didn't see a threat. To them, it was a curiosity, an ancient warship still clinging to life. The Dominion's commander, a towering creature of glimmering carapace and glowing eyes, had called it an artifact of a bygone era. The order went out to destroy it, not out of fear, but to erase the eyesore from their pristine domain. Inside the Resolute, the crew watched the approaching fleet on their flickering monitors. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running low on everything: fuel, ammunition, even hope. The captain, a quiet, graying figure with years etched into his face, didn't waste words. "They think we're weak," he said, his voice steady but cold. "Let's remind them what humans do when cornered." The crew moved without hesitation. These weren't the soldiers of polished fleets or high-tech navies. They were miners, engineers, and veterans of old wars long forgotten by the Council worlds. Each of them knew that this fight wasn't about victory. It was about survival. About sending a message that humanity still stood its ground, no matter how primitive others thought them to be. The Dominion ships began to close in. Their hulls shimmered with energy shields, and their weapons glowed with power drawn from reactors the size of cities. The Resolute, by contrast, barely kept its light steady. The human ship's targeting systems were manual, its shields analog, and its weapons loaded by hand. The aliens opened a communication channel, broadcasting on all frequencies. "Human vessel," a deep, resonant voice declared, "you are trespassing in Dominion space. Surrender your ship and crew for reclamation. Resistance will be met with extermination." No one on the bridge replied. The captain simply nodded to his crew, and the channel went silent. The first volley from the Dominion fleet was blinding. Beams of violet energy cut across the void, slamming into the Resolute's shields. The ship shuddered, lights flickering as the power grid screamed under the strain. Panels sparked, alarms wailed, and somewhere deep in the ship, a reactor coolant line burst. Still, the old warship held. "Targeting online," reported the weapons officer, voice calm despite the chaos. "Guns 1 through 4 ready." The captain gave a single word: "Fire." The response was thunder. The Resolute unleashed its railguns, firing slugs of tungsten at near-relativistic speed. There was no elegant flash, no glowing beam, just a deep guttural roar as kinetic fury ripped through the silence of space. The first projectile struck a Dominion cruiser dead on, punching through its shields and tearing a hole clean through its core. For a second, no one in the alien fleet moved. Then the cruiser detonated, a silent blossom of fire and debris scattering across the stars. Shock rippled through the enemy ranks. The old ship had just done the impossible. Its primitive weapon had pierced through technology thought to be impenetrable. Another round fired, then another. The Dominion's arrogance turned to panic as their ships began to fall, one by one, to a relic they'd dismissed as obsolete. Inside the Resolute, the crew worked in grim rhythm. Sparks flew as systems overloaded, yet no one faltered. They'd trained for this. Humanity had always been underestimated, always labeled fragile, chaotic, emotional. But that same chaos was what made them dangerous. They adapted. They fought dirty. They refused to die quietly. The Dominion fleet regrouped, now wary. Dozens of ships began to encircle the Resolute, forming a ring of light and power. The captain stared at the tactical map. "They're learning," he muttered. The engineer replied, "So are we." He rerouted what little power remained from non-essential systems to the forward cannons, dimming the lights until the bridge was lit only by the glow of the monitors. The captain turned to his crew. "If we're going down, we make them remember us." As the Dominion began their second assault, the Resolute braced for the storm. Plasma bolts tore across its hull, shredding armor and melting decks. Fires erupted, oxygen alarms screamed, and the ship's artificial gravity began to falter. Through it all, the human crew fought to keep their ship alive, hands blackened by soot and metal. Every time a system failed, someone found a way to patch it together. They didn't have the luxury of perfection, only determination. Outside, the Dominion commander watched in disbelief. Every strike they landed should have destroyed the human ship, yet it kept fighting. Scanners couldn't explain how its weapons hit so hard or why its systems hadn't collapsed. Something about its design, crude as it was, made it unpredictable to their advanced targeting AI. It was chaos embodied, a human creation that defied logic. The Resolute's captain stood at the center of the chaos, eyes fixed on the stars beyond the viewport. "They think power comes from perfection," he said quietly. "They'll learn it comes from will." He gave the order to charge the final weapon, the ship's spinal railgun, a relic of the earliest wars. It drew power directly from the core, overloading every system in the process. The engineer shouted warnings, but the captain didn't hesitate. The Dominion fleet began to close in, their weapons primed for the killing blow. The ship trembled, lights flashing red. The crew held on as the old warship gathered every last ounce of power it had left. Then, in one deafening moment, the Resolute fired. The shot ripped through the void like a lightning strike from the gods. It tore a path straight through the center of the Dominion formation, shattering their command ship in an explosion that lit up the entire sector. The shockwave rippled across space, scattering the remaining ships in confusion. But as the light faded, the Resolute went silent. Its engines dimmed, and its power readings dropped to 0. The crew sat in the darkness, the echo of the shot still ringing in their ears. They didn't know if they'd won or simply delayed the inevitable. The captain stared into the void, where the enemy fleet once stood, and whispered, "Now they'll remember." Outside, drifting quietly amid the wreckage, the once laughed-at human warship floated in silence. Smoke rose from its fractured hull, its guns quiet, but its message clear. Humanity was not to be underestimated. And as new signals began to appear on the edge of the system, more ships, unknown origins, moving fast, the question lingered in the air. Was this the end? Or just the beginning? For a long time, there was only silence. The Resolute drifted quietly among the wreckage, surrounded by the cold remains of the Dominion fleet it had destroyed. Inside the ship, dim emergency lights flickered across smoke-filled corridors. The once constant hum of the engines was gone, replaced by the occasional creak of metal and the faint hiss of leaking air. The crew had survived the blast, but the ship was dying. Down in the engineering bay, the chief engineer sat on the grated floor, hands blackened with soot, staring at the shattered control panel before him. The last shot had burned through most of the conduits, leaving the power core unstable. He wiped his face with a trembling hand, his voice low and hoarse. "We've got maybe 20 minutes of oxygen left in this section," he said. "If we don't get the auxiliary systems online, we're done." The captain knelt beside him, steady and calm even as the ship groaned around them. "Can we reroute from the forward batteries?" "Not without cutting life support to the aft quarters," the engineer replied. "We'd lose half the crew." The captain hesitated. His face was unreadable, carved with quiet determination. "Do it," he said finally. "We can't save everyone if the ship goes dead," no one argued. Everyone on board knew the cost of survival. They were soldiers of an older era, where decisions like this were made without ceremony or tears. Still, the silence that followed said everything. Each of them carried the weight of it, the quiet understanding that survival wasn't victory. It was endurance. On the bridge, the communications officer worked frantically, trying to restore long-range transmitters. The Dominion fleet had been destroyed, but there was no telling what else might be coming. The scans showed faint signatures at the edge of the system, more ships, but their design didn't match any known database. Human Dominion or otherwise. They were something new. "They're holding position," she reported, frowning at the flickering screen. "No identification codes, no transponders. It's like they're watching us." The captain turned slowly to look out the main viewport. Through the cracks in the glass, distant pinpricks of light hung motionless against the stars. They didn't move closer. They didn't respond to any hails, just waiting. "Keep scanning," he said quietly. "Let's see what they're after." Hours passed. Repairs continued in the half-lit corridors, and the tension on board grew heavier with every minute. The crew worked in silence, their faces streaked with sweat and soot. The ship was old, but its spirit was alive in them. Each of them had their own reason for being here. Some had lost families to Dominion raids. Others were veterans of the early human wars, too stubborn to retire. A few were just wanderers, drawn to the last place humanity still fought with its own hands rather than machines. The youngest among them, a navigator barely into his 20s, stared at the cracked star map glowing faintly on his console. "Sir," he said, turning toward the captain, "we're not supposed to be this far out." The Perseus Rim was marked uncharted for a reason. The captain nodded. "It wasn't just empty space out here," he said quietly. A long time ago, before the Council banned deep field colonization, human scouts found something in this region, something ancient. The navigator frowned. "What kind of something?" The captain didn't answer right away. He just looked at the stars beyond the glass, his expression distant. They never said. Every record of it was sealed. Some say it was an artifact, others a weapon, but the Council made sure no one ever came back to find out. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. The thought that they were drifting near forbidden territory made the air feel heavier. If the Dominion fleet had been guarding this area, maybe they weren't trying to expand. They were keeping something contained. Down in the lower decks, the engineer managed to bring partial power back to the auxiliary core. Lights flickered on across the corridors, casting pale illumination on the worn metal walls. He slumped against a bulkhead, exhausted as the soft hum of the system slowly returned. But before he could even relax, one of the junior techs shouted from across the room, "Sir, you need to see this!" The engineer pulled himself up and crossed the room. On the screen, data from the ship's scanners streamed in, faint rhythmic signals pulsing from somewhere beyond the wreck field. They weren't random. They were structured. "That's not background noise," the engineer said, frowning. "That's a transmission." They patched the feed through to the bridge. The sound that filled the room wasn't language, not at first. It was a sequence of tones, deep and echoing, almost like the call of some vast creature across an ocean of space. But beneath it was a pattern, numbers, repeated again and again. The captain leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "That's human code," he said slowly. "Old distress formatting. Pre-Council era." The bridge went silent. Everyone knew what that meant. Humanity hadn't sent ships this far in over a century. Whatever was sending that signal was either impossibly old or impossibly patient. "Trace the source," the captain ordered. They triangulated the signal, finding it near a dead moon orbiting a gas giant not far from their position. The Dominion had left heavy patrol routes nearby before the battle, but their destruction had cleared the way. The captain made his decision. "Prepare a shuttle." "We're going down there." The crew exchanged uncertain looks. The ship was still damaged, the enemy could return at any time, and the mysterious fleet watching from the system's edge hadn't moved. But none of that stopped him. Curiosity, or maybe duty, was stronger than fear. The shuttle launched quietly from the Resolute, its engines dimmed to conserve power. Through the viewport, the planet's swirling atmosphere glowed faintly beneath the light of a distant sun. The closer they got, the stranger it became. The moon's surface was littered with metallic wreckage, the remnants of ships older than any human design. Some still bore insignias that had faded into near oblivion. Others were shaped in ways no human shipbuilder would have imagined. As they landed near the signal source, the scanners began to distort. Instruments flickered. Power readings spiked and dropped in strange rhythms, as if the ground itself was alive. The captain led the small team out of the shuttle, stepping into the thin, icy air. At the center of a shallow crater stood a structure half buried in rock. A tower of black metal, humming faintly with energy. Its surface was etched with symbols, some alien, others disturbingly human. The signal was coming from within. The captain ran his hand along the smooth metal surface. It was warm, almost pulsing beneath his fingers. "Whatever this is," he murmured, "it's still active." The engineer crouched beside a shattered panel near the base, connecting a handheld terminal. "It's running on a hybrid matrix, part human, part something else. The data's looping like it's waiting for a command." The navigator looked around uneasily. "You think the Dominion knew about this?" "They weren't guarding it," the captain said softly. "They were afraid of it." The ground trembled suddenly, a deep rumble that echoed through the air. Dust fell from the cliffs surrounding the crater, and the tower's hum grew louder. The engineer shouted over the noise, "Something's powering up!" Back aboard the Resolute, alarms blared as sensors detected a sudden energy surge from the moon's surface. The crew scrambled to regain communication with the shuttle, but interference filled every channel. The strange fleet at the edge of the system finally began to move, slowly, deliberately, toward the human ship. The captain and his team stood frozen as a beam of pale light rose from the tower, piercing the thin clouds above. The signal shifted in pitch, now carrying a voice, a human voice, distorted but unmistakable. "This is the Ark Protocol," it said. "Humanity endures." The message repeated again and again, echoing across the stars. The captain stared at the tower, his mind racing. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't just old technology. It was a message from the past. A warning, or maybe a weapon. As the ground shook harder and the light intensified, the captain shouted to his crew, "Back to the shuttle now!" But before they could move, a blinding pulse of light engulfed the crater and the signal cut off. Aboard the Resolute, the crew watched the sensors go dark, their screens filled with static. The mysterious fleet closed in, silent and unyielding. And in the heart of that silence, one question hung heavy in every mind. Had the Resolute just awakened something far greater than they understood? The bridge of the Resolute was filled with uneasy silence. Every screen showed static where the shuttle's signal should have been. The captain's chair sat empty, the crew frozen between panic and disbelief. No one wanted to say it, but everyone knew what they were thinking. The landing team was gone. The communications officer kept trying, switching frequencies, boosting signal power, but the result was the same, nothing but noise. Somewhere out there, their captain and the others had vanished into that impossible light. The engineer, now acting officer, stood at the viewport, his reflection pale in the flickering light. "That wasn't a natural energy burst," he said quietly. "It was coordinated, like the thing down there responded to something. Maybe us." The others exchanged glances. The thought that they might have triggered whatever the tower was built for made the room feel colder. The Dominion hadn't been afraid of the tower without reason. They'd been guarding it because they understood what happened when it woke. Outside the ship, the distant fleet that had been watching began to shift formation. They moved with eerie precision, no wasted motion, no visible propulsion. Their ships didn't shine with engines or weapon ports. They simply glided through the dark like shadows cast across the stars. The Resolute scanners couldn't identify their origin. They weren't human, but they weren't Dominion either. Something about their construction felt older, too perfect, too deliberate. "They're closing in," the weapons officer said. "At this rate, they'll be in firing range in 6 minutes. "Maybe they're not hostile," the navigator offered, though his voice trembled with doubt. "Maybe they're here for the same reason we are." The engineer shook his head. "No one sends a silent fleet without a reason." He turned to the crew. "We hold position. If they make a move, we respond." But deep down, even he knew the truth. They didn't have the strength for another fight. The Resolute was barely alive, its systems patched together with desperation. A single broadside from those ships could tear them apart. Down on the moon, the captain woke to darkness. The air was thick with dust and the smell of burnt circuitry. His ears rang and his suit's visor flickered with red warnings. He looked around and saw the shuttle torn in half, the hull glowing faintly from the blast. The rest of the team was scattered across the crater floor, dazed but alive. The tower loomed above them, silent again. Its black surface reflected the pale light of the nearby gas giant, as if nothing had happened. But when the captain looked closer, he saw faint cracks running along its sides, lines of dim blue light pulsing in slow rhythm. Whatever they had activated wasn't over. It was just beginning. The engineer on the team struggled to his feet, holding a damaged scanner. "Sir, you should see this." He turned the screen so the captain could see. A faint signal was repeating through every frequency, not just human channels. It was everywhere, echoing across space. The same phrase, looping endlessly. "Humanity endures." But it wasn't just a broadcast. The signal was carrying data. Encoded, ancient data. Maps, coordinates, entire. Sections of space that had been wiped from human records after the Council. "Era. Someone or something wanted this found," the engineer said, quietly. Before the captain could respond, the ground beneath them vibrated again. A deep mechanical groan echoed through the crater. The tower wasn't just transmitting, it was waking something below. The dust began to shift, sliding away from buried structures half hidden under centuries of rock. Shapes emerged, old ships, their hulls half fused with the earth, and vast machines that looked like part of the moon itself. Then the captain saw it, an emblem, faint but unmistakable, etched into the metal of one of the buried vessels. It was the insignia of the first human deep colonization fleet, ships that had disappeared long before the galactic records began. Humanity hadn't just explored this region. They had built here. Back aboard the Resolute, the sensors began to register the same movement. The moon's surface was shifting, large masses rising from beneath the crust. The crew watched in stunned silence as the readings formed a pattern, a formation of structures around the tower, perfectly symmetrical, like a planetary defense grid. "What the hell is that?" whispered the navigator. The engineer leaned over the console. "It's old human tech, but it's mixed with something else. The energy readings don't match anything we've ever seen," the comms officer interrupted. "The incoming fleet is changing course. They're spreading out, surrounding the moon. They know it's active." The Resolute floated helplessly in orbit, watching history unfold below. Every instinct told them to flee, but something held them there. Curiosity, fear, duty. Humanity had always been drawn to mysteries, even when it should have run. Down below, the captain and his team moved toward one of the exposed structures. The doorways were sealed, but as they approached, the surface reacted to their presence, parting open with a slow, grinding sound. Inside, the air was stale but breathable. The walls were lined with machinery long dormant, and in the center of the chamber was a console covered in strange symbols. Some were alien, but others were unmistakably human. The engineer ran his hand across the console. "It's reading our biosigns," he said. "It recognizes us." "From what?" the captain asked. "From the ARC protocol," the engineer replied. "This system was built to respond to humans. But it's not built by them, not entirely. It's like they had help." The captain studied the carvings along the walls. There were murals, simple ancient depictions of ships and stars. They showed humans standing beside other figures, taller, faceless, guiding them. At the center of it all was a great circle, half dark, half light, a symbol of unity or division. Outside, the strange fleet began to send out probes. They drifted toward the moon, scanning, observing. The Resolute's sensors detected encrypted transmissions passing between them, too advanced to decode. The crew watched as one of the probes hovered close to the wreckage of the Dominion fleet, analyzing the remains. It seemed to ignore the human ship entirely, as if they were beneath notice. The engineer frowned at the readings. "They're not reacting to us because they already know what we are," he said. "They're not surprised to find humans here." On the moon, the captain activated the console. The symbols rearranged themselves, forming a single line of text in an old Earth dialect. The words made his stomach tighten. The seed must return to its source. Before anyone could question it, the floor beneath them lit up with a grid of glowing lines, and holographic projections filled the room. They showed star systems, hundreds of them, each marked with faint signals identical to the one from the tower. Across the galaxy, there were others like it, hidden, waiting, connected. This wasn't just a colony, the captain whispered. It was a network. The engineer nodded slowly. The ARC protocol wasn't a message. It was an activation command. And then, as if in response, the tower outside flared to life again, brighter than before. The light shot straight into space, and every one of the mysterious ships stopped moving. For a moment, everything was still. Then the fleet began to change formation again, this time facing outward, away from the moon. "What are they doing?" asked the weapons officer aboard the Resolute. The sensors answered for them. All across the sector, new signals appeared, identical towers lighting up one by one, forming a web that stretched across hundreds of light years. Something vast and ancient had just awakened, and humanity had been the key. The engineer on the bridge turned pale. "We might have just triggered a chain reaction across the entire frontier." The navigator stared at the star map in disbelief. "If those towers were built by early humans, that means we were never the first," the engineer finished. "Someone taught us. Someone planned this." Down on the moon, the captain and his team felt the ground begin to shake again. The lights inside the buried structure turned from blue to crimson, and deep within the earth, something massive began to move. The captain turned to his crew, his voice steady despite the fear tightening his chest. "Get the data," he ordered. "We need to get this back to the Resolute." But as they moved toward the exit, the doorway sealed shut, trapping them inside. The console pulsed once more, and the same distorted human voice echoed through the chamber. "Humanity endures, but not all who endure survive." The sound faded, replaced by a deep rumble that shook the walls. Outside, the fleet in orbit began to power their weapons, not aimed at the humans, but at something rising from beneath the moon's surface. The crew aboard the Resolute stared at their screens, horror spreading across their faces as the readings spiked higher and higher. "Something's coming up from underground," the weapons officer said. "And it's big." The engineer clenched his fists. "It's not just a relic. It's alive." As the first massive shape began to break through the moon's crust, light spilling from its surface, the Resolute's sensors finally identified it. Not a ship, not a weapon, something older. Something built when humanity was still learning to walk among the stars. And as the readings stabilized, a single line appeared on the display, one the computer translated automatically. "Origin vessel, awakening." The engineer stared at the words, his heart pounding. Whatever they had just uncovered wasn't meant to be found, and now it was awake. The moon trembled like a living thing. Dust and debris lifted into the thin air as the surface split open, revealing enormous structures hidden beneath layers of rock and time. The Resolute's sensors went wild, readings spiking into impossible ranges. Every frequency was jammed by the energy rising from below. The crew stood frozen on the bridge, watching the image unfold on their cracked monitors. Something vast was emerging, a structure that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. It wasn't a ship in the traditional sense. It looked grown, not manufactured, as though it had evolved from the very stone of the moon. The engineer gripped the edge of his console, knuckles white. "That thing," he whispered. "It's not part of the tower network. It's something older." The communications officer's screen flashed with new data. "We're getting signals from it," she said. "Multiple layers. Some in ancient human code, some in patterns I can't even begin to translate." The Resolute vibrated as the gravitational pull shifted slightly. The structure's sheer mass was enough to alter the moon's orbit. Outside, the silent alien fleet changed formation again, encircling the moon like sentinels. For the first time, their ships powered up fully, their hulls glowing with energy lines that pulsed in rhythm with the rising object below. The engineer swallowed hard. "They're not here to destroy it," he said. "They're guarding it." Down on the moon, the captain and his team stumbled as the floor tilted beneath them. The chamber lights dimmed, replaced by flickering red flashes that pulsed with the same strange rhythm. The engineer at his side struggled to keep his footing, his voice strained. "Sir, the energy output is off the scale. Whatever's under us is waking up fast. Can we stop it?" the captain demanded. The engineer shook his head. It's not reacting to us anymore. It's running on a protocol of its own. The walls began to shift, panels sliding open to reveal new symbols, some glowing with faint light, others carved deep into the metal. The patterns looked almost organic, like veins pulsing with energy. The captain reached out and touched one of the panels. It felt warm, alive. And in that moment, a flood of images filled his mind. He saw flashes of ancient Earth, cities lit by unfamiliar skies, ships leaving orbit long before recorded history began. He saw humans standing beside towering figures of light, building vast machines under their guidance. And then he saw fire, planets burning, stars collapsing, fleets scattering into the void. The vision ended with a single phrase echoing through his thoughts. The seed must return. He stumbled back, gasping. It's showing us our own past, he said. But not the one we know. The engineer stared at him. You're saying humanity didn't start on Earth? The captain looked up at the ceiling as dust fell from above. I don't know, but I think whoever built this place did. The energy surged again, cutting through their conversation. A blinding light erupted from the tower outside, shooting straight into space. It pierced through the formation of alien ships, and for a moment, the entire system lit up. On the Resolute, alarms screamed. "Energy wave expanding," shouted the navigator. "If it hits us, we're done." The engineer slammed his hands over the controls, trying to divert what little power they had left into the shields. "Hold it together," he shouted. "We're not going down now." The wave struck. The ship groaned under the pressure, its metal hull bending but not breaking. Lights flickered, then went dark. For a moment, everything went silent again. When power returned, the view outside had changed completely. The alien fleet had vanished, gone without a trace. In their place, new structures floated in orbit, massive geometric constructs that pulsed with the same blue light as the tower. They weren't moving, they were waiting. The crew stared in stunned silence. "What are those?" the navigator whispered. The engineer stared at the readings. "They're gates," he said. "Massive ones. They're linking this system to others across the galaxy. The implications hit everyone at once. The tower network was connecting, activating something ancient, and humanity had just been the key to unlock it. On the moon, the captain and his team managed to force open a hatch that led to the surface. The light from the tower was so bright they had to shield their eyes. The ground shook violently beneath their feet, cracks spreading outward like veins of lightning. The air vibrated with low-frequency sound, too deep to be natural. Then, through the glare, they saw it. A colossal figure emerging from the chasm below. It wasn't alive in the biological sense, but it moved like a living creature. Its body was made of interlocking plates of metal and stone, its eyes two blazing spheres of light. It stood upright, towering over the crater, its form humanoid but impossibly vast. The captain's voice was barely a whisper. "It's one of us." The engineer looked up, speechless. "No, it's what came before us." The creature turned its gaze toward the sky, and the blue light around it intensified. A voice, deep and ancient, resonated through the air, not through sound, but through thought. Every member of the team felt it in their minds, like a memory buried too deep to forget. The cycle continues. The makers return. The test begins. The captain fell to one knee, gripping his head as the words echoed inside him. Images flooded his mind again. Fleets burning, worlds falling silent, civilizations erased. The same sequence repeating over and over across eons. Humanity wasn't the first to rise, and it wouldn't be the first to fall. Back aboard the Resolute, the sensors locked onto the figure. The engineer's voice trembled as he read the data. "It's drawing power directly from the moon's core, and the gates are responding. They're opening!" One by one, the massive gates around the system flared to life. Streams of light poured through them, ships, thousands of them, pouring in from across unknown regions of space. Some were similar to the Dominion designs, others unlike anything the crew had ever seen. But none of them were attacking. They were converging. "What if this is a summoning?" the navigator said. "What if we just called them all here?" The engineer didn't answer. His hands moved across the console, trying to make sense of the readings. But the more he looked, the clearer it became. The structure wasn't just a weapon or a machine. It was a beacon, and now that it was awake, it was calling out to every corner of the galaxy. On the surface, the captain looked up as the sky filled with ships. The air shimmered with the heat of their entry, streaks of light descending toward the horizon. The massive figure below raised its hands, and the ships began to slow, forming into ordered patterns around the moon. It was as if the thing was commanding them. "Sir," the engineer said, voice shaking, "we have to leave, now, before it decides what to do with us." But the captain didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the towering figure, and the light reflecting in them wasn't fear, it was realization. "This isn't the end," he murmured. "It's a test, to see if we're worthy of what they left behind." The ground shook again, harder this time. The shuttle's remains slid toward the edge of the crater. The team ran for cover, trying to avoid falling debris. The captain turned back once, just in time to see the figure look directly at him. For an instant, he felt its gaze pierce through him, like it was looking into his memories, his thoughts, his very being. Then the light flared again, and everything went white. On the Resolute, the screens went dark one by one. Every system overloaded, every circuit screaming under the strain. The crew shouted over the noise, fighting to keep the ship stable as gravitational waves tore through space, core temperatures spiking. The engineer yelled, "We can't hold this much longer." The navigator looked at the display, voice breaking. Captain's signal just reappeared. "It's moving, fast. Where?" He swallowed. Up. Through the front viewport, they saw a column of light rising from the moon's surface, shooting straight into the gates above. Inside that beam, for a brief second, they could see the silhouette of the captain's team, rising, disappearing into the light. The engineer turned pale. "It's taking them somewhere. Where?" the comms officer asked. He looked at the readings. "Another system. Another part of the network." Outside, the colossal figure raised its arms again, and the gates began to pulse faster. One after another, they flared open, connecting into a single vast web across the stars. The Resolute was caught in the center of it, surrounded by a storm of light and energy. The crew clung to their stations, blinded by the brilliance of it all. And in that moment, just before the ship's systems finally gave out, the engineer looked up, his voice barely audible. "They called our ship primitive," he said. "But maybe we were never meant to be." The Resolute vanished in a burst of white, leaving nothing but silence behind. And far across the galaxy, in the heart of the awakening network, something vast opened its eyes. Light faded into silence. Then, slowly, sound returned, a faint hum, low and rhythmic, echoing through endless emptiness. When the crew of the Resolute opened their eyes, they were no longer aboard their ship. They were standing on solid ground, beneath a sky that glowed with unfamiliar constellations. The air shimmered faintly, the horizon stretching into a landscape both alien and eerily familiar. Metallic spires rose in the distance, each humming with the same pulse that had carried them through the gates. The engineer was the first to speak, voice shaking. "This can't be real. We were caught in the beam. The ship was gone." The captain looked around, eyes narrowing. "If this is death, it's too structured, no pain. No void, just this." He crouched and touched the ground. It was warm, smooth, alive somehow, like the skin of a colossal creature. "We're still in the network," he murmured. "We've been transported, somewhere built for whatever came before us." Above them, a thin shimmer appeared in the air, and a faint voice spoke, a blend of multiple tones, human yet not entirely so. "You are the first to awaken. The test begins where the creators ended." The crew instinctively drew closer together. The voice continued, calm yet haunting. "Each world holds a fragment of truth. You must restore what was broken, or face what they became." Then the shimmer vanished, leaving only the humming wind and the sound of their own breathing. The captain turned to his team. "We find shelter. We find answers. Then we figure out who or what brought us here." They began walking toward the nearest structure. As they approached, the details became clearer. The towers weren't ruins, they were functional, alive, constantly rearranging themselves. Panels shifted as if reacting to their presence, glowing with faint blue symbols that looked almost human. The language felt familiar, as though someone had taken ancient Earth text and evolved it into something new. Inside the first tower, they found what looked like an observation hall. The walls projected moving images, scenes of planets, stars, and massive gateways just like the one they had come through. But one detail stood out. In every image, the ships passing through those gates bore human markings. The engineer frowned. That can't be right. Humanity's only been exploring for a few centuries. These gates are millions of years old. The captain stepped closer to the wall, watching as one of the human ships in the projection exploded in a burst of light. Maybe time isn't what we think it is here. Maybe we're seeing echoes, records of something that's still happening or has yet to happen. Before anyone could respond, the entire room shifted. The floor beneath them rippled like liquid metal, rising into a circular platform. Symbols flared around the edges, and a holographic figure appeared above them. It was human, or at least it looked human. The figure was tall, translucent, dressed in a uniform that bore the same insignia as the Resolute. Its face was calm, but its eyes flickered with static. "You shouldn't be here," it said in a voice identical to the captain's. The crew froze. The captain took a step forward. "Who are you?" The figure tilted its head slightly. "I'm what remains of you. This system remembers all who enter it. Every thought, every decision. The network doesn't just record, it replicates." The realization struck like lightning. The structure had copied them, their consciousness, their memories, even their fears. The captain's hand trembled slightly. "You're saying we're duplicates?" The projection smiled faintly. "Copies made for the next stage of the test. The originals failed long ago." The words sank in like cold iron. The crew exchanged glances, fear creeping through the room. The engineer's voice broke the silence. "Then where are the originals now?" The figure turned its gaze toward the distant horizon. "Sleeping. Waiting. The creators never left, they just changed form." The platform trembled suddenly, the air rippling with static. The figure began to distort, its voice breaking apart. "It's coming. The Guardian knows you're here." Then it vanished, leaving behind a single echoing phrase. "Run!" Without hesitation, the captain shouted, "Move!" The crew sprinted from the tower as the ground behind them split open. A blinding beam of energy shot into the sky, followed by a deep, resonant roar that didn't sound mechanical. It sounded alive. The air thickened with heat and static, and from the fracture rose a colossal shadow. The creature's form was fluid, its body made of swirling metal and light. It had no distinct shape, yet every movement radiated intent and power. The air around it bent, warping reality itself. The navigator's voice cracked. "That's the Guardian?" The captain's jaw tightened. "Whatever it is, it doesn't want us here." The creature roared again, and the ground erupted. Waves of molten light raced toward them, carving deep scars into the terrain. The crew barely managed to dive behind the remnants of a smaller structure as the first blast passed overhead. The shockwave was so powerful that it lifted them off their feet. "We can't outrun it," the engineer shouted over the noise. "It's reading our movements." The captain scanned the landscape, eyes darting toward the spires in the distance. One tower glowed brighter than the rest, pulsing like a heartbeat. "There!" he pointed. "That tower, it's different. Maybe it's a control hub." They ran, dodging debris and bursts of light as the Guardian pursued them. The ground crumbled beneath their boots, revealing glowing veins of energy running deep below the surface. It was as if the entire world was alive, shifting to stop them. As they neared the glowing tower, the captain's communicator flared to life. A distorted voice came through, a voice that didn't belong to any of them. "Do not fight it. The Guardian protects the core. You must reach the heart before it seals again. Who are you?" The captain shouted into the device. But there was no answer, just static and faint echoes of someone breathing. When they reached the tower, they found its entrance already open. Inside, the structure felt different, warmer, almost human. Lights traced their path, guiding them upward. The captain led the way, ignoring the low rumble outside as the Guardian closed in. At the top, they entered a circular chamber. In the center floated a sphere of light, about the size of a human heart. It pulsed with energy that felt both alien and familiar. The captain approached slowly. "This must be the core." As his hand neared the sphere, his communicator flickered again, this time showing the face of an old man, weathered but unmistakably human. "If you can hear this," the man said, "then the cycle has begun again. We were the first humans to reach this place. The network offered us eternity, but it took our humanity in return. Don't make the same mistake." The image froze, then dissolved. The captain's hand hovered over the sphere. "They accepted the test," he whispered. "And became something else." The engineer's voice was urgent. "Sir, if that thing outside breaks through, we're finished." But before he could respond, the chamber began to shake. The Guardian's shadow loomed through the open doorway, its glowing tendrils coiling into the room. The sphere in front of the captain pulsed faster, reacting to the creature's presence. Then, in a blinding flash, the sphere projected a stream of light upward, connecting directly to the sky. The entire planet seemed to respond. The ground stilled, the air hummed, and the Guardian froze mid-attack. Its tendrils stopped inches from the captain's face. A voice echoed through the chamber, calm and powerful. "The seed remembers. The air has returned." The captain stumbled back, shielding his eyes. "What does that mean?" The Guardian lowered its form slightly, as if bowing. Its once violent glow dimmed into a softer light. Then, before anyone could speak, the entire room began to dissolve around them. The walls turned transparent, revealing a vast network of worlds interconnected by shining gates, each pulsing in unison with the sphere. The engineer stared in awe. "It's not just one planet. It's a whole chain of them, all connected." The captain clenched his fists. "Then this isn't just a test. It's an invitation." Outside, far beyond the network, something stirred. An enormous structure emerging from the void, larger than any fleet, older than any star. Its surface shimmered with symbols matching those on the towers, and at its center, faint but unmistakable, was the emblem of Earth. The captain's heart sank as realization hit. They didn't just find this place, they built it. The crew stood frozen, the truth unraveling before them. Humanity wasn't the newcomer to the stars. It was the remnant of something far older, something that had once ruled the galaxy and erased itself from history. The voice returned one last time, soft but resonant. "The Makers return. The cycle must complete." And as the gates around them began to open once more, flooding the void with light, the Resolute's crew understood they weren't just explorers anymore. They were the spark that would awaken everything humanity had tried to forget. Light spilled through the dissolving walls like liquid sunrise, washing over the captain and his crew as the towers around them melted into streams of raw data. The sky was no longer black. It was alive, filled with moving constellations that looked like circuits woven into the fabric of space itself. The network, the ancient system they had stumbled into, was waking up. Every pulse, every flicker in the void carried a rhythm that echoed deep inside their minds, as though the universe itself remembered them. The Guardian stood still now, its once violent energy dimmed into calm light. For the first time, it seemed to hesitate, as if waiting for something. The captain turned toward it, his voice steady but strained. "If you understand us, then tell me, what is this place? What are we supposed to do?" The Guardian tilted its massive head, and the symbols across its body shifted into patterns that resembled words. A soft vibration filled the air, translating into sound. "You are the end and the beginning, the ones who erased their own creation. The network obeys the Maker's code. You have returned to reclaim it." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. The engineer whispered, "It's calling us the creators." "That can't be right." The captain stared at the light sphere still floating at the center of the chamber. "Maybe it's not wrong," he said quietly. "The man in that message, he said they accepted the test. What if that test rewrote them into something else? What if our ancestors built this network and sealed it away to forget what they'd done?" Before anyone could respond, the tower trembled violently. The glow of the sphere intensified, expanding until it filled the entire room. The captain shielded his eyes, but through the blinding light he could see shapes, images flashing too fast to follow. Human faces, fleets of ships, planets burning and rebuilding. It was history rewriting itself before their eyes. A calm voice spoke again, different from the Guardians, more human, almost gentle. The war you abandoned destroyed entire civilizations. You built the network to preserve what was left of creation, but you couldn't live with the guilt, so you made yourselves forget. The images slowed, revealing a planet that looked eerily like Earth, surrounded by hundreds of colossal rings, the same rings they had found near the gate. The captain's breath caught. "Those weren't alien structures," he whispered. "They were ours," the voice continued. "Every generation that followed carried fragments of memory, fragments of the code. Until now, when you came searching again. The cycle must end. The choice is yours." The captain turned to his crew, his heart pounding. "It's giving us a choice. Either we restore the network or destroy it for good." The navigator frowned. "If we destroy it, what happens?" "Then all of this ends," the voice replied. "The gates collapse. The knowledge and power your ancestors buried will vanish forever. Humanity will remain free but blind. And if we restore it?" the captain asked. The Guardian lifted its gaze, eyes glowing like dying stars. "Then the creators return. You become what they once were, keepers of the network. But your humanity will change." The silence that followed was suffocating. Every heartbeat felt heavier. The engineer broke it first. "We came here to explore, not to play gods. If we turn this thing back on, we might not even stay human." The captain's jaw tightened. "And if we destroy it, we lose everything we've learned. Everything our species could become." The sphere pulsed again, sending waves of energy through the air. The ground beneath them cracked open, revealing streams of glowing data, surging like rivers of light. The entire chamber was becoming unstable. The Guardian took a step forward, voice rumbling like thunder. "The system cannot wait. Choose now." The captain closed his eyes. In that moment, he thought of Earth, the pale blue planet still spinning somewhere in the dark, unaware of what was unfolding out here. He thought of the generations who would come after, looking up at the stars, wondering what had come before. And he realized that the real test wasn't about power or legacy. It was about memory, about who they wanted to be. He opened his eyes. "We're not here to rebuild the past," he said. "We're here to make sure it never happens again." The Guardian let out a low, resonant sound, almost mournful. The captain stepped toward the sphere, his hand trembling as he reached out. "Shut it down," he whispered. "All of it." The instant his fingers touched the light, the entire world erupted. Blinding energy surged outward, rippling across the horizon like a tidal wave. The Guardian roared, its form unraveling into shards of brilliance. The towers collapsed one by one, folding inward as the network began to consume itself. The crew was thrown to the ground as gravity twisted, space folding in on itself. The captain could feel the heat, the vibration, the raw power tearing through every nerve in his body. Yet through it all, a strange peace filled his mind. He could hear the voice one last time, softer now, fading. "You have chosen forgetting. May this time, humanity remember enough to stay kind." And then, silence. When he opened his eyes again, he was back on the bridge of the Resolute. The alarms were quiet. The stars looked normal. The crew was alive, though shaken. The navigator blinked in disbelief. "Sir, what just happened? Did we—" The captain checked the instruments. The massive gate that had pulled them in was gone. No trace of energy, no sign of the network. Only empty space. "It's over," he said softly. "We shut it down." The engineer leaned back in his chair, running a hand over his face. "Do you think anyone will believe us?" The captain didn't answer immediately. He looked out at the stars, at the quiet expanse that stretched endlessly ahead. Maybe they don't need to. Maybe it's better they don't. For a long moment, the bridge was silent. Then the navigator spoke. "What if it comes back?" The captain gave a small, weary smile. "Then we'll be ready next time. Because now we know what's out there, and what we're capable of." The Resolute turned slowly, engines igniting as it began the long journey home. The stars ahead glimmered faintly, like a path waiting to be followed. But as they moved into open space, the captain noticed something on the edge of the view screen, A faint flicker, like a ripple in reality. It was small, almost invisible, but unmistakable. The faint outline of a gate reforming far in the distance. A soft pulse, faint but steady, echoed through the ship's sensors. The captain stared for a long moment, then spoke quietly, almost to himself. "I thought we ended it." The pulse grew slightly stronger, as if answering him. Then, through the static of the communication system, a voice whispered. A voice that sounded like his own. "The network never dies. It only waits." The sound faded, leaving behind only the hum of the engines and the distant glitter of the stars. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but no one spoke. There was nothing left to say. The captain turned his gaze forward again, the weight of the universe heavy on his shoulders. Humanity had survived the test, but as he stared at that faint shimmer on the edge of space, he couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't over, that the network, the creation of their own forgotten past, was still watching, still waiting for them to remember, and somewhere beyond the horizon of known space, in the quiet dark where old memories slept, a single gate flickered back to life, its ancient code whispering the same phrase over and over, cycle restored. The stars blinked in silence, carrying the echo of the forgotten. The Resolute kept moving forward, unaware that humanity's past wasn't buried after all. It had only been dreaming. The Resolute drifted quietly through the void, its engines humming like a heartbeat in the silence of space. The crew moved with a kind of solemn calm, their minds still heavy with what they had seen, the truth about the network, the creators, and the forgotten history of humanity. Days had passed since they escaped the collapsing system, but time felt strange now, stretched and fragile, as though reality itself was still settling around them. The captain sat alone in the observation deck, looking out at the stars. They no longer seemed distant or mysterious. They felt alive, almost familiar, as if they were watching back. He couldn't shake the memory of the voice, the one that sounded like his own, whispering that the network never truly died. Part of him wanted to believe they had ended it, that humanity was finally free from the shadows of its past. But deep down he knew better. Some things were too vast, too woven into the fabric of the universe to ever truly end. The door slid open behind him, and the engineer stepped in. "You've been staring out there for hours," he said softly. "You expecting it to come back?" The captain gave a faint smile. "I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just trying to understand what we really did out there." The engineer leaned against the railing beside him. "You made the right call, sir. If we'd let that network wake fully, it would have changed everything. Us, Earth, maybe the whole galaxy. We saved what mattered." The captain nodded slowly. "Maybe. But I keep wondering what it means to save something by forgetting it. Every civilization that came before us built something, reached too far, and then vanished. Maybe that's what the network was trying to stop, our habit of destroying what we create." The engineer sighed. "That's just what we do, isn't it? Build, break, rebuild. Maybe this time we'll do better." Their conversation faded into silence. Outside, a nearby nebula shimmered with faint light, its clouds rippling like slow waves. It reminded the captain of Earth's oceans, peaceful from afar, but hiding infinite depths below. In the following weeks, the Resolute continued its journey back toward human space. The crew repaired what they could and documented everything that had happened, though none of them were sure what they would say once they returned. How could they explain it? A lost human empire, an ancient machine network that remembered them, a guardian that bowed to their command. It all sounded impossible. In the following weeks, the Resolute continued its journey back toward human space. The crew repaired what they could and documented everything that had happened, though none of them were sure what they would say once they returned. How could they explain it? A lost human empire, an ancient machine network that remembered them, a guardian that bowed to their command. It all sounded impossible. Still, the data logs told their own story. The scientist aboard, quiet and methodical, spent hours decoding the fragments of information they'd brought back. One day she rushed into the captain's quarters with something in her hands, a small device no bigger than a stone, humming softly. "It's from the core," she said. "I found it in the wreckage of our cargo bay. It's still active." The captain frowned, taking the device carefully. "Active? I thought everything from the network was gone." "It should be," she said. "But this one's different. It's not trying to connect to anything. It's storing something." He examined it under the light. The surface was smooth and dark, but when he tilted it, faint blue lines shimmered beneath the surface, just like the symbols they'd seen in the towers. "What's inside?" he asked quietly. The scientist hesitated. "I think it's memories." "Not data, memories. From before the collapse." The captain set it on the table between them. "Then maybe this is all that's left of them. The real creators. For a long time, they just stared at the device." It pulsed gently, steady as a heartbeat, as though waiting to be remembered. That night, the captain couldn't sleep. He stood by the viewport again, holding the device in his hand. The hum it made wasn't just sound, it was emotion, faint but familiar. He felt like it was calling to something deep inside him, a connection older than memory. "Maybe forgetting wasn't the only answer," he whispered. "Maybe we were meant to learn from it, not erase it." He placed the device into a sealed compartment on the bridge, marking it as restricted. "Not for now," he said softly. "But one day when we're ready." The Resolute reached human territory weeks later. Their re-entry into known space was quiet, uncelebrated. The communications relays didn't recognize their ship signature at first. Their time in the network had distorted everything, even their ID codes. When the Federation finally responded, it was with confusion more than relief. "Resolute, report your status." "You were listed missing for almost 2 years," came the message from command. The captain exchanged stunned looks with his crew. 2 years? He repeated. To them, it had felt like only a few weeks. Whatever had happened in the network, time hadn't flowed the same way. Command demanded a full debrief, but the captain kept his report simple. He described an encounter with an ancient system, a near-catastrophic event, and a successful escape. He left out the parts that no one would believe, the creators, the guardian, the voice that spoke like his own. Some truths, he decided, weren't ready to be known. When the Resolute finally docked at the orbital station above Earth, the crew stood silently, gazing down at the planet. Clouds drifted across the surface like slow dreams, and the blue oceans gleamed in the sunlight. Home had never looked so fragile, or so alive. The engineer broke the silence with a small smile. "After everything, it's still here," the captain nodded. "Yeah, and maybe that's enough." In the weeks that followed, the Resolute was inspected, repaired, and decommissioned for study. The crew went their separate ways, each carrying the weight of what they had seen. None of them spoke publicly about the network. The official reports called it an anomalous energy field, nothing more. But late one night, as the captain sat in his quarters on Earth, his communicator buzzed. It was a private channel, one that hadn't been active since the day of the collapse. He opened it, and the signal came through in fragments, static, faint breathing, and a single word. "Remember." He froze. The voice was his own, not a recording, something new, distant, yet unmistakably his. The screen flickered, then went dark. He sat in silence for a long time after that. Outside, the city lights shimmered like stars trapped on the ground. Maybe the network was gone, or maybe it still lingered, hidden beyond perception, waiting for the next step in the cycle. He walked to the window and looked up at the night sky. The stars seemed closer now, brighter somehow. He thought of the generations that would follow, humans who would build ships faster, reach farther, and one day find the gates again. When they did, he hoped they would remember, not just the power they could wield, but the mistakes that came before it. For the first time in months, he smiled. Humanity had faced its reflection in the void and chosen to remain human. That, he thought, was victory enough. The small device from the core still rested in its sealed case in the Federation archives, pulsing faintly in the dark. No one could hear it, but if they could, they might recognize the soft rhythm. It wasn't random. It was a heartbeat. Human, steady, alive. Far beyond Earth, past the edge of known space, one last gate remained, dark, silent, and motionless. But for the briefest moment, a single line of light flickered across its surface. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it faded again, leaving the stars untouched. The cycle had ended. Or perhaps it was only sleeping, waiting for humanity to be ready to remember who they truly were. And among the endless stars, the Resolute's legacy drifted quietly, a story carried by light and time, a reminder that even in the vastness of the universe, the most powerful force was not the weapon that fired back, but the heart that chose to stop it.